9:29, so I can't start early. That would be illegal.
They thought you were opening the joke.
Sorry, open the joke.
We started this year on the tradition that was back 15 years ago. We started exactly on time.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was afraid you were going to say we started this year 15 years ago on condition we start with an opening joke, and I didn't have that prepared. I have to do tshuva for all the ones I forgot. Okay.
That should be another share.
Yes. Okay, on that note, good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone for coming and thank you for those. This is a busy Sunday morning, Erev Yom Kippur. It's also the Sunday, we didn't say Vinoam last night, right? It's the Sunday before the Yom Tov Sukkah, which means it's the Home Depot Sunday, the Sunday which people build their sukkahs, and a big ashikar for everyone who comes. So debating what topic to do on such a day, Erev Yom Kippur, also the Sunday before Sukkot. So I decided I'll do both. The shir is entitled Yom Kippur, and I picked Shemini Atzeres. Yom Kippur and Shemini Atzeres. And what's the common denominator? See if it's seat. What's the common denominator? Oh, welcome. What's the common denominator between Yom Kippur and Shemini Atzeres? This title perplexed a few people over Shabbos. Like, here, what are you giving shir on? What's Yom Kippur and Shemini Atzeres have in common? So here's my train of thought. Yom Kippur, we know, is a day of tshuva. And simply we think of tshuva in terms of fixing, Atzeres we did, bad things we did. Lashon Hara, other Atzeres people do. You think about Yom Kippur as fixing those. But actually, if you go through Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the most famous svarim on tshuva, Sefer Shari Tshuva, Rabbeinu Yonah in the third shar of Shari Tshuva goes through the beginning. He talks about, first chapter, he talks about all different elements of tshuva. He talks about inspiring a person to do tshuva. But in the third parak, he just goes through basically all the mitzvahs in the Torah and defines how far the mitzvah goes, how far the Avera goes. And the idea behind Shar Shlishi of Rabbeinu Yonah is a person is supposed to learn the mitzvahs if you want to do tshuva, because a person could see, okay, there are some things we know flat out it's the wrong thing to do. We shouldn't have screamed at that person, for sure not in public, over that issue. But there are some things we do, and they're good things we do. But we do it right. Well, maybe we could do better. I'm doing a mitzvah, but maybe I could do the mitzvah in a better way. Maybe I'm missing a certain aspect of a mitzvah. And therefore, part of the tshuva process, not just fixing the wrongs, but bettering the rights. Yimashvish b'maisav. So, I was thinking, I think it works twofold. It works for Yom Kippur, okay? A lot of times there are certain things people may not do correctly because they didn't know about it. Now those things, in a certain sense, it's an easy way to fix it. If you learn about it, it might be easy to fix. But then things could also get complicated. Let's say you know about it, but especially if you do something in life for so many years, the odds of a person changing is not so simple. I don't like the American expression, but the words are, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So these things happen over life, but I think the day before Yom Kippur is probably the best day a rabbi wants to talk about topics. It might be the best day now. I think there's one other advantage I have. I happen to think there are some topics in halacha Rabbanim do not address in their congregations, in their shuls, because it's too sensitive, too much of a hop, too much of a fight. That's why it's good. I don't have a shul. This is my only pulpit. Okay, I have talked to my talmidim, but Yeah, I don't come with any affiliations. You can't fire me, right? I'm here. So, Nela, I have more weight. I could get away with some things, which maybe others can't. So the topic I want to talk about today is the topic of eating in the Sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. For some, it might be pashut one way. For some, it might be simple the other way. Definitely people have been doing things over the ages. So I wanted to learn the topic anew, and let's see what we see about this topic. That's today's share, sitting in a Sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. Right? I'll take on behalf of Chassan, who just walked into the room. Before I walked into the share, I asked, so they call a son of a posek, does your father still get a lot of shilas about eating a Sukkah on Shemini Atzeres? He's like, yeah, all the yeshiva bachrim have shilas about their parents, what they should do when they go home. And you have sometimes guys that get married. Oh, what should they do? Shana Rishona, they come and they see what happens in this family over on Shemini Atzeres. It's different what they were brought up with. So Shemini Atzeres is ripe for issues in this area, and thus the more you know going in, the better. So we definitely made a page worth of Marmakomos for that. So let's start with the Gemara. This is a Gemara in Masechah Sukkah, Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Pretty simple, 6 words. Bishmini, on the 8th day of Sukkot. Now, before I even begin, one other important introduction. Shemini Atzeres takes on a totally different perspective in Eretz Yisrael versus in Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, Shemini Atzeres is really Simchas Torah. It's all one big day. If anyone ever had the schus of spending Sukkot, specifically the last days in Eretz Yisrael, Shemini Atzeres is a day like no other day, right? You're davening for Geshem, right? Agave's nightmare, right? You're running hakafos. You want to make sure the guy who davens Geshem is not drunk. Berachos Kohanim. There's so much going on Eretz Yisrael, Shemini Atzeres. It's whoa, right? And imagine if you're American in Israel, it just blows your mind. So Shemini Atzeres in Eretz Yisrael is halachically different than here in Chutz La'aretz, where we have Sveika Diyoma, we observe 2 days because of the calendar issues. So therefore we have one day dedicated to Shemini Atzeres, and the second day dedicated to Simchas Torah, makes Agabay's life easier. But in halacha, the middle we come to issues, does one sit in a sukkah on Shemini Atzeres? On the one hand, there's a concept of Shemini Atzeres is regal b'fnei atzmo. It's its own Yom Tov, right? In Tefillah, we don't say Chag HaSukkah Hazeh, we say Shemini Chag HaAtzeres Hazeh, or some other version of those words. Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfarad have a little different versions. But Lagabi, the issue of sitting in a sukkah, since there's Sveg Yoma Shilos, so we'll see. It's debatable. One might think, does one sit in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeres? So comes the Gemara in Sukkah, and the Gemara says the following, 6 words. Bishvini Mesav Yasvina. On Shemini Atzeres, Mesav Yasvina means we definitely sit. Baruchi lo mevarchinon. But we do not make a bracha. The Gemara is trying to be a little poetic, a little bit of a rhyme. Mesav Yasvina, Baruchi lo mevarchinon. We sit in a sukkah. Gemara says that black and white. But we don't make a bracha. Why don't we make a bracha? So we said it's suffix if there's a chiyuv sukkah. And though the Gemara is basking because it's a suffix, this is something we do. Suffix l'chumra, we want to go and make sure to mekayim the tzad that one needs to sit in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. So Gemara paskins, you definitely sit in the sukkah. But in terms of a bracha, anytime you're dealing with a mitzvah, which is a suffix, so then the bracha, the birchas mitzvah, will be a suffix bracha. The rule by brachos is suffix brachos lahaka. If you have a suffix in a bracha, the general rule is you don't say it. So that's why in Shemini Atzeres we would sit in a sukkah, but we wouldn't make a bracha. Before we go to the Shulchan Aruch, one more stop along the way. There's a Mordechai. Mordechai in the back of the Gemara in the Sukkah brings a Raviyah, again another Rishon. The Aser Lishon B'Shmini B'Sukkah. It's Aser for one to sleep Shemini Atzeres in a Sukkah. Even if one normally sleeps in a Sukkah the whole Sukkahs. On Shemini Atzeres, the Raviyah holds it's Aser to sleep in a Sukkah. What's the reason? Mishum Bal Tosef. Because you're adding. Here, now, we discussed, since it's Sveka Diyoma issues, suffix on the calendar of when the Yom Tov is finished. So that's why we're sitting in a Sukkah. But that the Raviyah brings up, there's potentially a big issue. What about the fact of Bal Tosef? You don't want to do something which is clearly an addition. Right? One's not allowed to add to the mitzvah. Right? The Torah says, Basukkos Teishu Shivas Yomim, no one's going to say you can sit in a sukkah for 10 days. Right? Your Shabbos after Sukkos. Okay, we can talk about this. But let me give an example outside of Pesach, outside of Sukkos. Right? No one's going to say, you should eat matzah on the 25th day of Nisan. That's Bal Tosef. You can't add on top of mitzvahs. So seemingly, anything involving a sukkah should be Bal Tosef. The Raviyah in fact says you can't sleep in a sukkah because of that. It's Bal Tosef. Does one take luv and esrog on Shemini Atzeres? Why not? Seemingly because of Bal Tosef. One can't add. So then, if you can't add to a mitzvah, and that's why you can't sleep, but the Gemara said you definitely sit in the sukkah. How's that make sense? If there's, on the one hand, I'm balancing, there's a suffix mitzvah. Suffix mitzvah, okay, let's do the mitzvah. Mahachmer. No, but it might be Bal Tosef. Oh, so I don't want to do that. So then how come one sits in a sukkah? So the Raviyah explains.
That's saying the brachos. You're not doing the whole part of it.
Excellent.
Don't eat matzah, but don't say a bracha on the matzah.
So Alan, you had your coffee this morning, right? The Raviyah says exactly what Alan just said. Look, tell your grandkids. This is beautiful. The bishlam b'achila yesh haker. When it comes to eating, there's a clear distinction. Masha inu mavarech. You're not making a bracha on it. Avo b'sheina like a hacker. When you sleep in a sukkah, one doesn't make a bracha. So how are you distinguishing between the rest of the Yom Tov, which is a chiyuv, and today, which is not, which is a suffix? So Alan said, when it comes to sitting in a sukkah, I won't make a bracha. So that's the distinction. When it comes to sleeping, you never make a bracha by sleeping. Chazal set up the birchos leisha b'sukkah with eating. That's why all the Yom Tovim, anytime you sit in the sukkah, you sit in the sukkah to read the newspaper. You know what you should do? Go in with a piece of cake. Make a leisha b'sukkah on your cake. And then you sit in the sukkah and you read a newspaper.
What's a newspaper?
Huh? Oh, right. They used to have these printed things. In the Jewish world, we still have some newspapers.
According to this, shouldn't we just wave lulav and esrog without a bracha anymore?
Yeah, it's a good point. Right? In this world, I could hear the idea of, I thought of such a kasha. How come now?
There's a major difference.
Yeah.
Lulav and esrog after the first day is only the rabbanon. But the sukkah is all 7 days, well 8 days is the raisa.
Good point.
It could also be on the
Very
side
good
that
point.
it could also be on the side that you don't need to do it on Shemini Atzeres. It might be muktzah anyway.
Right. I think that they also say.
Well,
So let me quickly run through. Okay, now let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so that's the Gemara, that's the Mordechai. Comes the Shulchan Aruch. This is Simon Tafresh Samaches. V'chutz la'aretz, ochlim b'sukkah b'laylo v'yom. One eats in the sukkah both the night and the day. Memneshu suffix shvi, because it's a suffix whether that's the seventh day. The Eimer varchem al shivasa, right? And you don't make a bracha on sitting in the sukkah. Umakdishin, you make kiddush. V'omim zman, you say shachiyan. Let's go through all the Mishnah Berurahs. This way, we're well versed in all this. B'laylo v'yom. He says, after you eat a suda during the day, and go sit in your house. This is something which I remember from my youth, everybody did. Growing up, I think probably the most common concept minhag I saw around me, this is growing up in Brooklyn, was most people did not eat in a sukkah, Shemini Atzeres night. People would come in Shemini Atzeres morning, make a kiddush, they would make the yiratzon, I want to be by the Levyason, the sukkah of Mashiach, and say goodbye. That was a common practice I saw around. So, you know, it's interesting. This yiratzon, that everyone was super confident. Make sure to do that. While the Chavetz Chaim writes, Avol Yisrami leilach la'afil ben hashmashos. If it was normal, if you happen to eat, even mamish close to shkia, tzarich lecho b'sukkah. One has to eat in the sukkah. For those who remember from yeshiva, we used to have in Simchas Torah and Shemini Atzeres, the yeshiva would have a gathering on Shemini Atzeres going into Simchas Torah. The yeshiva always held that gathering in the sukkah. So practically, I never said goodbye to the sukkah, in the afternoon. I said it was already the evening. Shemini Atzeres after mincha, going into Simchas Torah, the yeshiva always would be sitting in the sukkah, having a shmooze, having an event. That's the Mishnah Berurah there. Now, what's the reason we said it's because of suffix shvi? So the Chavetz Chaim brings, mitamza harbe achronim mitzadim nitzar gamkein lisham b'sukkah. There are many achronim who say, since it's suffix shvi, many people say you even have to sleep in a sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. The chenu gamkein das hagra. And the Chavetz Chaim weighs in, the gra was on this side. The yishom shzom she'in kedai lisham b'sukkah b'Shemini Atzeres. Lo b'yom v'lo v'layla. The also kechol. And he gives a different reason than what Alan and the Rabbi said before. When it comes to sitting in a sukkah, that's not a problem about Tosef or anything. Because sometimes people sit out anyway, nice weather outside. They'll sit outside. No one's going to sleep outside because it's nice weather. You sit outside, not sleep outside. Now the Chavetz Chaim in the Sha'ar Tzion in his footnotes brings, the Rav Yel brings what Alan said before, a second difference whether you make a bracha or not. Okay. Now, skip a few lines. Klolo shel davar, just to see how the Chavetz Chaim writes it out. Kol davar she'in tzarich levarech alav birchas leisha b'sukkah b'shari me'ach sukkah. Anything which you wouldn't. So we're sitting in a sukkah, we see the duration. According to the halacha, Shulchan Aruch, you sit in a sukkah at night, at day, all the way through Shkia, through Bein HaShmashos. One sits in a sukkah on the day of Shemini Atzeres. One does not make a bracha. That's what the Shulchan Aruch is writing, the Mishnah Berurah is explaining. I'm going to explain soon how did anything ever evolve not like this. But that's what the Chavetz Chaim is bringing here in the Mishnah Berurah. Now, he does, though, put in an important caveat. Klal shel davar, I'm reading 4 lines to the bottom. Kol davar she'in tzarech levarech alav birchas leisha b'sukkah b'shari me'achol sukkah ein olka b'sukkah b'shmini atzeres. If there's any type of food which normally you would not make a bracha of leisha b'sukkah on, You want to have a fruit. You want to have a drink. Right? You wouldn't make a leishiv on that. So, all those things in Olka B'Sukkah B'Shmini Atzeres. If you just have that type of snack, one does not go in Shemini Atzeres. Huh? Yeah, that could be. V'yesh b'kilim b'zeh v'chein b'stama da'achilas peiros chaygavna d'varim shein chayav mitzad adin yachol lasas b'yatzeres mashi yirtzu b'eisol b'sukkah. The Chavetz Chaim ready to go even more than that. Even something which you might have a minhag to make a bracha on, and you try to eat in a sukkah, but even that one doesn't have to eat in a sukkah. So right here in the Chavetz Chaim is saying a very important caveat. We only eat in a sukkah Shemini Atzeres a clear-cut meal, or something which absolutely the chol hadeos would be chai mitzad hadin in sukkah. So your mizonos, that type of achila, that you should do in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeres, again without a bracha. But anything less than that, one doesn't. Another caveat. This the Mishnah Berurah doesn't bring down, but I'll spell it out. It's a pashut step.
It's not just saying you don't have to eat them, it's saying you shouldn't eat them. So.
Correct. Right? Rabbi Lichtman just said a very important point. Right? These things, right? Again, what's the idea we're eating in the Sukkah Shemini Atzeres? Because of Sveika Diyoma, Shemini Atzeres might still be part of the 7-day Daraisa Chiyuv of eating in the Sukkah. So I eat in the Sukkah, but at the same time, we have to have a hecker, we have to distinguish between this and the rest of Sukkahs. That's why we don't make a bracha, and it has to have a clear hecker. So especially if the reason, let's start even without the Rabbi Yoel, the reason he had, because it's normal for you to eat things. Okay, it's normal to eat things, depends what. So we're only eat in the sukkah things which are absolutely chayiv in the mitzvah. Similarly, I saw if Shmuel brings this down, others say this, the level of rain that would exempt one from eating a sukkah on Shemini Atzeres is a much lower bar than the rest of sukkahs. Same type of thing. Because if it ever looks that the reason why I'm out here is because of the mitzvah of sukkahs, you can't do that. You need a hecker. You can't be Baal Tosef. So once there's any degree of inclement weather, there's a little drip during the rest of the Yom Tov, you'd stay in a sukkah. But on Shemini Atzeres, you'd go out. Has to be pristine conditions for that.
In Chutz La'aretz, why don't we say it's a Sveika? Shemini Atzeres, and then also Sveika Diyoma.
Okay, hold on. Now, interesting question. Now, so you see, people didn't have that much coffee yet. You see, when it comes to Shemini Atzeres, it's a fine line. On the one hand, the Machaber, the Gemara, it comes from the Gemara, the Chavetz Chaim Paskin here in Mishnah Berurah, he's pasking 100% it's a chiyuv to eat a Suda night, day, and anything you would have up until Ben HaShmashas. At the same time, he's also saying it's only for foods which are vade chayiv in the sukkah. Now chumrah and extra things, and we added huadin for the temperament, for the surroundings, the weather. It's only if the weather is good, you eat in the sukkah. If it's any degree bad, we would eat in the house. Now, Lamaisa, let's go a little further. You look at the bottom of your page, I have down here a Aruch HaShulchan, of course before that, this is brought by Shmuel, a Torah, Yadua de Minhag Rabim Shalachol B'Shemini B'Sukkah. Look, there are many people that have a minhag on Shemini Atzeres not to eat in the sukkah. Right? And to be honest, this minhag could go back 100 years or more. V'yish nogim shololecha b'layla v'rak b'yom ochlin. There are some people they don't eat at night, just in the day. Kvar kosav azal Torah. So you're talking about this minhag, really how far back it can go, right? The Torah, the son of the Rush, all the way to the times of the Rishonim, they dealt with a situation where people were not eating in a sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. The Gemara said, you eat in a sukkah. In the times of the Rishonim, there were those who didn't eat in a sukkah. The Kasav al Zeh Torah, the Eino Minhag. The Torah says, halakhically speaking, that does not have the status of a minhag. Right? Now you would think, right? Where's Rabbi Fried? Right? What constitutes a minhag? Okay, yeah, it's something your parents did, your grandparents did. Hey, that goes back 100 years. This goes back hundreds of years. So you think at a certain point, it gets a stamp. This is a minhag, no? Passed over child to child. Right? Strong. Comes the Torah. Halachically, that doesn't count as a minhag. The Aruch HaShulchan writes, "Inei kol elo dvarim kvar tzivcha kami gedolim deilasos kain." And all these things, many gedolim already scream not to do this, to hold back from eating in sukkah. The kivin the Gemara nifsach halacha sheyosh b'shmini atzeres b'sukkah. Since the Gemara already paskin, you have to eat in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. In Kain, Strik, and Leisha, Kol Laila, Kol Yom. Aruch HaShulchan, the Rav in Europe, already paskin. No, you have to eat in the sukkah, both day and night. He happens to, Aruch HaShulchan paskin, also even to sleep in a sukkah. L'maisa, the Metzias is, Minhag Avosenu B'Yadeinu. There are many, many fine, wonderful, observant Jews who did not eat in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. First and foremost, how could that happen? There is the Torah, time of the Rishonim, said this is not considered the minhag. Okay, so how does it still exist today? You would think, okay, you say the rabbis of our generation not strong enough to change things. The Torah couldn't change something? The Torah wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the Beis Yosef reveals some Kara wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shabura, the Aruch HaShulchan. Why is it still a problem? So I saw a fascinating pshat, which Pasha makes sense, and sometimes the best person to go for these type of halachic issues is someone with the last name Kamenetsky. Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal had a tremendous perspective in both halacha and history. Zabizunzain, the Rosh Hashiva of Shmuel Kamenetsky, Yeshiva Refuah Shlema, Shmuel Ben Etel, has that perspective. His son, Rav Shalom Kananohara, shares that perspective. Kamenetskys are quite talented people. But Rav Shmuel says, I'll tell you what Pshat is. This is how it happened. This is his sociological thesis of what went down.
I like this.
Right?
Yeah.
What was the weather conditions of Europe, where Jews lived for thousands of years, right? Before we got to Florida is not where the Jews used to live. This is the new Yishuv here, right, Harvey? You want to go so back here in Florida. So Sukkot in Europe was a nice, cold place. My father grew up in Montreal. He understands what I meant, Sukkot in Europe, right? Cold place. Let me ask you a question. According to the halachas we delineated in the halachas of Shemini Atzeres, would one eat in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeres in the frigid Russian, Eastern European weather of Sukkot? The answer is no. Halachically speaking, they might be even doing the right thing. Pashtus. Because we said Shemini Atzeres, you could eat in the sukkah where there's a hecker that it's not the same as the rest of Yom Tov, and it's not clear that you're doing it l'shem mitzvah. But if you're sitting out there freezing in Russia with only a shot of vodka to warm you up, if you're sitting out there in Eastern Europe,
You don't have heated sukkahs.
right? So then, okay, you grin and bear it, or gin and bear it for
I like that.
for the first days of Sukkot. But come Shemini Atzeres, you can't. So Shmuel says that's how it developed. And unfortunately, through the ages, when we crossed the Atlantic and we came to America, and Baruch Hashem, we got warmer climates even before Florida. Lamaisa, oh, my father didn't eat in the sukkah. My grandfather didn't eat in the sukkah. And it's not so hard to understand how this developed. That people just came with, look, this is what we did in Europe, this is what my grandfather did. But stop. You have to understand, why did they do that? What was the reasoning behind them doing it? And
that being said, now that it's as young Lieberman said, we're in the opposite extreme here.
So it's interesting. I reached out to a friend of mine.
It's too hot here.
I owe my father a lot of Vakar Satov. My father's a learned person. And I grew up, we ate in Sukkah. I was one of the only people I knew in the neighborhood. All my friends did the shtick, have a kiddush during the day, maybe eat a full meal during the day, but nobody ate in the Sukkah. I was like one of the only people in the town eating in the Sukkah. Okay, I eat in the Sukkah, that's what I do. But I didn't have this challenge. But a lot of my friends all grew up with this challenge. I asked one of my friends. He said, yeah, when I was a kid, we no one ate in the Sukkah. But nowadays, my parents eat in the Sukkah. In Brooklyn, they know the halacha. And Mamela, people change. People do it. In yeshiva, this is a quite common concept. I think I have full disclosure. I can say this out. My shver, okay, his father was a rav, so I believe they ate in the Sukkah. But the other Rosh Yeshiva, David Harris, grew up in a Baal Bata Shalom in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And his family did not eat in the Sukkah.
It's cold.
So he learned in yeshiva. Look, you read the Mishnah Berurah, you see the halacha. There's a chiv to eat in the Sukkah Shemini Atzeres. Yes, it's a Rashiv Rabbana. Rebbe, what do I do? He says, you should eat in the Sukkah. My parents! He says, look, you tell your parents, you learned in yeshiva, this is the halacha. We're not looking to make strife, but this is a halacha. So, that's what people did. It's a challenging situation. Not simple. Right? I was just learning with Talmidim the other day, talking about, halacha brings, if there's bugs in a sukkah that really bothers a person, want to go inside. So I said, I'll say, what happens if bugs are bothering your sister, but it doesn't bother you? What happens then? What does the family do? Do they go in the sukkah, stay in the sukkah, send her inside? She's not chayiv anyway. She's a kid, she's a girl. It's not so simple, right? You break up a family, that's what goes on. But here it's sort of the other way. There, it might be because one person has a Torah, everyone might be Megalgal Mavimo. Everyone might have a right to go with them. But here it's the other way. Everyone starts off with a chiyuv. Question is, okay, what to maneuver, what to do. But the Pashup shot, again, one could ask a rabbi, and if your Rav told you not to eat in the sukkah, it's on his shoulders. But Maisa, I think the world today, Baruch Hashem, I think this is a perfect example where you see that Limud Torah makes a difference. Is when in the earlier generations, people may not have known so well, Baruch Hashem, in the world today, there's much more knowledge, there's much more scholarship, much more people going to yeshiva. And Mamela, people learn more than earlier generations. It's a balance. Nowadays you also have people learn more and they come up with the craziest chumras. And all my parents, like, buddy, you're not God's gift. Relax. You came up with one sheet of one chumrah, which no one thought of. You're going to do it. Your parents didn't do that. No, in yeshiva we tell guys they should not be doing those things. But this is different. This is a black and white halacha from the Gemara to the Shulchan Aruch to the Mishnah Berurah, which is pretty clear cut. I want to grab and have a chance to go through any Sephardic halachas, but we don't have any Sephardim here in the share live, but Sephardim watching. I did not research the Sephardic Psak halacha, but Lanias Daiti, the Jewish world is halachically is in agreement that Shemini Atzeres is something that someone could eat in the Sukkah. And even a person just, hasn't done it till now, even just toying with the idea, coming into Yom Kippur, should be a schus for all of us. We should be zocha to gemar chasima tova, good ben shtior. When you're putting up that sukkah today, have in mind you can put it up for one more day. Thank you very much for listening.